We good?
We are.
Okay. I know the first year and a half after you retired, you really didn't do much in terms of working out. And tell about the 5K you did, which is a little more than a 3-mile run. How'd you do on that one?
I retired, and the following fall, I was enjoying myself. I was doing about what I thought I would do. I like to do stuff out on my property. I would bike and run some with my wife. I was staying in fairly decent shape, but I was eating like I was 21 and in top shape. That being said, not like top shape eating fish, and I was eating everything like I'll burn it off. You know, I'm 21, I'm fine. Well, all of a sudden I got on the scale like around November, and I had gained 25 pounds. And I didn't really think. I knew my pants had gotten a little tighter, but I thought I'm biking and running, and then I realized that regardless, you got to watch what you eat. I was watching it, whatever. But my wife and several of her training buddies that same fall, a year after I had retired, were running in a 5K here in town for one of the local churches that put it on, and there's 250 people signed up. So I drop her on the way. They're talking about the run, and I'm listening to them. And I said, and honestly, and I've told the story, and you probably heard it. I didn't know what a 5K was. I didn't know mileage-wise what that equated to. Didn't care, because I'd probably ran a mile nonstop maybe once in the previous 8 years. There was no reason for me to do that. Mm-hmm. And why would I do it again? I'd go out and run half a mile or quarter of a mile, bike a little bit. So they're talking. I said, you know what? I think I'll run with you guys today. And they were like, oh, okay. And I said, look, I don't think I can keep up with you. But I was kind of saying that like a little braggingly, like I don't think I can, but I can run nonstop. I said, how far is 5K? And they said 3.1. I said, no problem.
Did you think that you'd kick their ass?
Well, I didn't think I would beat them. I thought, because I knew that they had been doing this over and over. But I thought, okay, I can run it nonstop. I didn't know anything about pace. I didn't have a Garmin watch. My wife had all this stuff. They talking pace, and we got to start off doing this. I'm thinking, what's the big deal? Pace, you pace me, I pace you. I had no clue what they were talking about, but I said, I can do it. So there was all these people, and I didn't care about signing up and getting a number and a belt and all this stuff. So all these people waiting, they're getting loose. And I told the group, I said, I'm going to ease through the woods right up here. And so when you get like 50 yards up, I'm going to jump out with you. I didn't want to make a big scene or anything. And they said, okay, that's fine. So I'm waiting, and they start them, and here they come. And it's on a bike trail here in town, so it's kind of congested, so everyone's kind of falling in line. And I jump out with them, and I start running their pace. And honestly, I was probably 50 yards into it. As I think back, what was the first thing? What was the worst? And it's a toss-up. I thought I was going to have a heart attack, and my calves were going to explode. And it was like, which one's going to stop me first? So I'm running with him, and again, I don't have a pace watching it, but I knew this was way too fast. So I'm like, oh, you guys go ahead. I'm just going to kind of slow down. Little did they know, if I didn't slow down, I was going to die.
Bruises the ego a little
I'm like
bit.
50 yards into it, I'm thinking, this is awful. So I'm walking, I got all these people passing me, and most of the people I knew. Little old ladies passed me. Hey, you're doing good, Brett. I said, thank you. And I'd walk some, I'd run. I'd walk a little bit, and I said, well, I can run. I can do it now. I'd make it 100 yards. And I'm like, I just got done playing football like a year ago. I'm supposed to be an athlete. I think the icing on the cake was like, I finished in like 48 minutes. A lot of walking, some running. And 48 minutes, I couldn't tell you what a good 5K was, but that's embarrassing for a not too far out of retirement athlete. But all these kids were past me. And when I would run, I'd kind of pass the kids back up. But then I would walk, and then they would, they were running the whole time. And like they passed me the last time, and it eventually beat me. They were like, "Oh, Mr. Brett, you're doing so good. Keep it up, keep it up." And I'm walking at the time, so I was like, I mean, that's kind of the way I've done my whole career. I mean, something has to motivate me, something has to challenge me, and I wasn't really challenged at that point. I'm done with playing. There's really nothing left to do necessarily. I'd kind of told myself when I retired, and a lot of guys do this, is like, I ain't doing nothing. I'm not working out. That's all I've done. I mean, you're paid to do that, and you're told to do that, and if you don't, you get fined. And after a while, it's work. And that's the kind of the way I looked at it. And then all of a sudden it changed, and I said, I'm gonna challenge myself. I'm gonna see how fast I can run a 5K. Why? I just am.
And aren't you working out more now almost than when you were playing?
Yeah, now
I mean, there's
now it's almost much like how I've done my whole career. I mean, I played golf, but then all of a sudden I really got serious in golf. And I mean, I'm cleaning my balls. I've got a little dot on them and scraping the grooves out. I mean, I don't even play golf anymore. I kind of dove in deep, was in it for a while, and then now I hope, as far as the training aspect of it goes, because this is your life you're talking about. I think you can get into something too much, too great, and then there's also the flip side where you do nothing. I enjoy going out, running, biking. You feel better. I'd like to think that I'm delaying the adverse effects that come along with playing and aging. I'd like to think that, at least, and I think a big part of it is the mental game that you play with yourself. But I feel better. I feel a lot better Monday mornings, or I think back to what it was like after a game. And it was as I got older, especially, it was the recovery. I don't even want to say it was recovery. It was just about when you started feeling better, you played again. And it was just a snowball effect. And I don't have that anymore. That's not to say that the cumulative effect won't take its toll at some point, but I'm trying to keep that at a minimum.
And I'll talk about that in a bit, but it's interesting. I'd imagine somebody who saw you when you finished playing and then saw you today. I mean, there's no gut on you, obviously. You're ripped as...
Got it sucked in right now.
Yeah, right. You're, pretty ripped, and I'd imagine, better
I'm in better shape right
than
now, I know,
when you
and
were playing.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Why it's crazy, I don't know. I think because the consensus is that a lot of the guys, when they're done, they're done.
Right.
And before they know it, they've let themselves go, like we all do it. I mean, I did it a couple of years ago. I was 25 pounds overweight,
Right.
If you saw a picture of me then, I had some puffy cheeks, and I looked like I was enjoying chocolate chip pound cake, which I was.
Hey, nothing wrong with that, though,
No.
when you have to, keep yourself in shape.
I still treat myself
Right.
to ice cream, or we went to a movie last night. I had some caramel popcorn and some Whoppers, and so I need to run today, by the way. Thanks for reminding me.
There you go. So you were offensive coordinator of the local high school football team here for a couple of years after you retired. And I mean, you're in daily practice during the weekdays from 2 to 5 p.m. You would have games Friday nights, film sessions on Sundays. Why do it?
Sometimes I ask myself that question because it was not overly time consuming, but I had to be there. I committed to doing it. So if I wanted to go on a 3-day hunt, I couldn't do it. If I just wanted to, ride the tractor all day, I couldn't do it. I had to stop at some point, go up and work with these kids. But I really enjoyed it. It wasn't something I had always thought I would do after I played. The head coach here, who's still the head coach, he's been a head coach in Mississippi. He's a legend. His name's Neville Barr. all the years that I got ready to go back and play and ESPN was camped out and all that stuff, all that footage was at Oak Grove. And Neville, years and years ago, was gracious enough to allow me to come work out there with the kids. And I knew a lot of their families and stuff, so it wasn't like, oh my God, Brett Favre's here. I live in this community. I know most of these, I obviously know a lot of these kids now, but they're families. And so Neville was like, it's good for our kids. And I said, it's good for me. It gives me, we would be running stadiums and these kids would kill me, but I was pushing myself because I didn't want to, we beat Brett Favre.
Sure.
They did to a certain degree, but it was pushing me. And it also gave me kids to throw to. Neville would say, look, when you retire someday, I'd like for you to coach with me, be my offensive coordinator. And I would always kind of, oh, sure, yeah, no problem, Neville. No. But back in my mind, I was like, no way. And so when I retired, he came calling. And at first I told him no. My first year I didn't coach, and then he said, come on, I really just, and I knew he was getting to the latter part of his career. He'd never won a state championship, had gotten close. It was a challenge, and I knew the commitment, the time commitment. I knew it was not like college or pros where you're there from daylight to dark and then some, and it's a year-round job. So I said, okay, I'll try it. And I just committed to being there every day. And honestly, I didn't know in fact, I told Deanna like the first night, I said, like the night before our first practice, I said, I don't know what kind of coach I'm going to be. I knew football, but that and how you relate it to someone are two different things. How I digest things and understand it and try to relate that to, you may go, I have no idea what you're talking about. You're not a good teacher, So that was the big challenge for me. And
well, tell about what you were told by your Packers head coach when you were a young Packers quarterback and how that influenced how you handled the situation with one of the young quarterbacks you were coaching.
Yeah, and you're probably referring to when Mike Holmgren basically put it in the simplest way. I was good at times. I was not so good at times. I was up and down, and in pro football, pro baseball, pro basketball, there's not a lot of room for marginal, or maybe a little less than that. Especially football, you have 16 games. We can't afford to give too many away. Baseball may be a little bit different. But I think there was a tremendous upside with me, and I think Mike Holmgren saw that. But when I say mutiny, and I can't remember the exact game, but it was in my second year, and the coaches more or less had voted, and I don't know exactly how it went down, but more or less voted that let's go with the other quarterback. And so Holmgren was like, you know what? I'm going to give him another chance. Now, this was told to me later, a week or two later. He calls me into his office, and I think part of my success is based on I was naive, not knowing any different. I thought, what the heck's a big deal? And I was kind of out in the dark. He says, Brett, the coaches, they want to go in a different direction, but I've told them no. And he may have been pulling my leg, but I think that's part of being a good coach, a good teacher. He said, I told him no, that I'm either going to go to the top or I'm going to go down with you. And collectively, we need to all have that mentality. So I'm with you. No matter what, I'm with you. Now again, he may have been saying for another week, but I won't tell him. I don't know, but that was a huge vote of confidence for me. I just felt, for whatever reason, I know he was the head coach, and if he said don't play him or play him, he had that authority, and so I just felt really confident, and I started playing much better. That really happened my first year as a coach, here at Oak Grove, and our young quarterback, our last game, we were not going to the playoffs, but he had one more year remaining. He had showed tremendous upside, but he also had great kid. I love Kirk to death. We had a lot of fun together, and I wanted to strangle him sometimes. And I would tell him that. I said, these coaches at halftime of our last game, they had actually said, let's put the other guy in. And I was ready to do the same thing, because I was always trying to push him and connect with him, and we would, but we wouldn't. And I was trying to get him to become tougher. Not so much physically, but more mentally. And not pass the buck off on the other guys, not whine, not complain. It's an extremely bright kid, which was different than me. I was not extremely bright. I was just extremely hard-headed. But they're ready to bench. I said, look, give him one more chance, and let me talk to him. And they said, okay, because every coach had voted to us get ready for next year with the other guy. And I went and pulled Kirk aside, and I told him, and I told him the truth. I said, look, they're ready to not only bench you, but run you off. You're whining, you're complaining. It's someone else's fault. You need to decide what you want to do. If you want to play, I'm behind you. I'm going to let you play the second half. And this is your chance to show them what you can do. We're not going to playoffs. And he said, okay, Brett, I'll do what I can. And he played lights out the second half. The following year, he has a great year. We win the state championship. And it wasn't the same as winning the Super Bowl, but there was such a reward in it that there was such a reward in coaching those 2 years. And I only stopped coaching because our daughter's is starting on the high school volleyball team, and they play the same time.
Right. You wanted to be.
I wanted to be at every game.
Right.
And they play Tuesdays, they play Thursdays. Sometimes we had to go off for weekend tournaments, and I wanted to be there. And I wouldn't have been able to had I coached. So that was the only reason I stepped down.
And winning that state title was far more satisfying, though, than you would have ever expected.
You know what? It was. It really was special. It was different because I'd been a part of a Super Bowl winning team, and that it's hard to compare to that. But in a weird, smaller sort of way, it felt the same, and that's, I think, from a coaching or from a teaching standpoint, that's why you do it. Not necessarily win a state championship, that would be great, but when you see that you make an impact on a young man or young woman's life, in a positive way, and that you did something good, or just for in a fraction of that is you coach a play, or you coach one move, or just something, and then they struggle to do it, and all of a sudden they do it. You go, yeah, they get it. You know, I mean, you feel like you're really doing something, and that was so much different than when I was playing, because I was on the other side of it. Maybe in the latter part of my career, I looked at things like a coach, or as a coach. I wasn't as naive. I kind of saw things like when we played a team that I knew we didn't stand a chance of beating. I knew we didn't stand a chance of beating. Right. When I was 25, I thought, we can beat anybody. And that's kind of the way you should approach it. But I looked at it more from a coach's standpoint. So that may be the only difference. The latter part of my career was kind of like the last 2 years of coaching. But it was hard to be in a situation where I couldn't control anything. I could call a play, but I couldn't throw it. That was the tough part. And I find, like, watching my daughter play volleyball, I don't know anything about volleyball. She would crush me in volleyball. But I want to go out there and spike it for her, or I want to go serve it for her. I want to get that block. But you can't. You just got to sit there and be a fan, and it's tough.
I want to run through some stories that are kind of funny and get you to quickly recall them. It seemed like you and your buddies growing up were up for whatever. And tell about the BB in your brother's chin.
Well, I shot my older brother in the chin with the BB gun. And people go, oh, you did what? And I said, well, it was his fault.
What do you mean it was his
Well,
fault?
I mean, I pulled
He
the
wasn't
trigger,
the one
but-
pulling the
no,
trigger.
but he let me put it up to his chin. And it was an old Red Ryder BB gun. And you could shake it. You could hear if there were BBs in it. And there was, you shook it, there was no BBs. And so like when you would shoot, it was air, it was an air rifle. You pump it up, and if there was no BB in it, you pull the trigger, air would, pop out of it. So I said, I don't know which one actually said, let's see what that feels like up against my chin. But I'm gonna say he did. So I said, okay, and I put it up to his chin, and lo and behold, there was a BB in it. And so he got shot in the chin. Moral of that story, every weapon is loaded, regardless. Don't ever, and that, that's a good example, but better him than me. And of course, who got spanked for it? I did. When I explained to my dad, he wanted to see what it felt like with the air on his chin. And so it was his fault, but needless to say, I think I got beat with a black rubber hose.
Well, you're the one that did shoot him with
I
a
did
BB.
pull a trigger, but I mean, he helped out.
He
right?
right. How did you once knock somebody out during a potato fight?
I guess I had a pretty good right arm. You're right. We were rambunctious. We were into everything. This one particular time, we were out throwing potatoes at each other, and I wasn't trying to knock someone out, but I say a local neighbor. I mean, it was like a couple miles up the road was over, and I just happened to hit him the right place at the right time with a potato and knocked him out cold.
And bricks at your brother once?
My older brother, he took a beating from me. I hit him one time with a brick, had to rush him to the hospital, cut him up under his eye.
I mean, this was intentional, was it? I mean, you guys were throwing bricks at each other.
I was not trying to hurt him with a BB gun. With a brick, I was trying to hurt him. He and a buddy of his were actually, they were harassing me, and they were trying to hold me down, beat me up, all this stuff, typical, whatever. And so I got away. I was actually going up the steps in our barn, and they were coming up, and I warned them. I said, I had a brick, and I said, if you come, I'm going to throw it at you. And they kept coming, so I threw it. And guess who got a whipping for that? I did. But I had no choice.
You dated your wife for 12 years before you got married, and I guess she kind of was part of the crew when you guys were younger. Did you really have her jump off the second story into the shallow end of a pool once?
She had no choice. Me and my brother, we grabbed her by the hand, and the shallow end was the close end, so you wanted to make it. So you take off running off of our pool house, and and I think back, if my kids were doing that, I'd be like worried sick, thinking of all the things that I did. I mean, we would be swimming in the river with gators. I mean, not necessarily, if I saw a gator out in the river, I would not go out there and swim. But maybe 3 days later, I would be. Okay. But you and I now are thinking, that's stupid. Well, we're jumping off this pool house, and we thought nothing of it. But now I think, one misstep, or you trip and you fall and hit the concrete, but we didn't think that way. We just knew, run as fast as you could, jump as far as you could, and you would be fine. And so we pulled Deanna with us, and I go back to my brother being shot in the chin. She got up there, so she sort of was willing, and then we just took her the rest of the way. And she was always not necessarily up for whatever, but she reluctantly would try things.
End up in the ER a lot as kids?
You would think so. I mean, my older brother and my younger brother did a few times, because I hit my younger brother in the mouth with an aluminum bat one time and had to rush him to the hospital.
Not intentional.
Not necessarily. I knew he was there.
Okay.
But I'd forewarned him that we were playing baseball. You need to get out of the way, and he's running around like through a sprinkler, and he was a little low. He knew better, but he didn't know better. He really did after that. and just cracked him in the mouth, knocked all his teeth out, and had to rush him to the hospital. And my older brother was allergic to everything growing up. He's since grown out of all of them. But he was allergic to bees, cats, a lot of different foods. So I just remember one time there was a big red wasp nest under a window eave. And so he looks under, you know, and right away, danger. And I looked at it and said, opportunity. And
Oh no.
smacked it with a broom and got him stung. And by the time we got him to the hospital, I mean, his head was like that big, you know, and I thought it was the neatest thing. But we get along great now.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
When you first got drafted in your first like big press conference that you had, you remember the Atlanta Falcons. You make some joke about where you grew up. What happens to your parents' mailbox?
You know, that was,
It was intended really to
it was intended
make
as
light of the situation.
Yes,
and
I mean,
people
I
took it the
love
wrong
the
way.
kill.
Right.
I was very proud of where I was from.
Right. It was completely taken the wrong way.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I was talking. I mean, I made it. I guess it came across as being like hillbillies and moonshining and gambling and all this stuff, and I didn't mean it in a. I know it sounds crazy, but I didn't mean it in a negative way, a derogatory way. I was proud of where I came from, but some people didn't see it that way, and that's the case a lot of times in those situations. But yeah, my parents caught a lot of. Everything is fine and dandy now, but that for a long time they caught a lot of flack. I can't even remember what happened. I don't know if they
Just told somebody shot up their mailbox.
Yeah, I was going to say that it got knocked over or something, but you're right. You're right. I mean, that I just remember like my parents saying, "Gee, thanks. You know, you get to go off and live somewhere else. We have to be here every day."
Yeah.
But yeah, you live and learn.
When you were growing up, you didn't always play quarterback. You were put in once at wide receiver.
The first time I ever played, I was a wide receiver, and I mean, I don't even know if that qualifies as playing, but it was my 5th grade year, I guess, and got one of the few times the ball was ever thrown at my school, period, even when I played quarterback, just happened to be when I was receiver, and I caught it, sort of, and fell on the ball and got the wind knocked out, and started crying, and I thought, this receiver position sucks. I got to play something else. And actually, after that play, after being a whiny baby, I got moved to quarterback, and never looked back. So,
How would you describe the area that you grew up in?
very rural, although it's growing some, a lot more so today. But growing up, it was.
The Kill.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't bike to your neighbor's house. There wasn't like a.
And why not? Just everybody lived
you'd
too
be
far away
biking
from each
5
other.
miles away, or
Okay.
there wasn't road bikes back then. You know, you had like a little Huffy with
Right.
tassels hanging off, and you didn't do it. There wasn't like community pickup football games, baseball games, because there just was not communities. I mean, you were patchy. You know, people were spread out. I mean, there were people that had to ride a bus 45, 50 minutes to school, and you may have passed 3 houses along the way. You know, I mean, it was out in the country, but hardworking, as we kind of talked earlier about naive and not knowing what you're missing and stuff. I mean, for me, all I knew was football and baseball. My dad was a football coach. He was a driver's ed teacher at my school for 30 years. My mom was a special education teacher. We didn't go on trips. I never skipped school. In fact, I went 12 years without missing a day of school. It's hard to miss when your parents are driving you to school. And so that's all I knew. And there wasn't any other distractions out there.
Your father, as you mentioned, was the head coach at the high school you played at. What do you think you most learned from him?
You know, the thing is with my dad, and it never bothered me because I was one of those that was self-motivated enough. And I had this conversation with people all the time, and you talk about what it was like with their dads growing up, especially down in the South, and there was this tough love. He may tell other people, boy, I'm proud of that boy. I never heard that. I know he was proud of me, but it was almost like this fear of being soft, you know, and from his standpoint, or from you know, he had to be tough all the time. And even when I'd made it, you know, but that was okay, because you know, regardless of how I played in any game, I mean, there were some times after a game I was like, you know, I played pretty good. You know, I may not tell people that, but I felt that way.
Right.
But even in those times, I would say, but you know, that's what's tough about playing the game for me, or was tough, is at some point the expectations were so great, even I couldn't, that I'd placed upon myself. The better you play, the tougher it is to outdo yourself, if that makes any sense. And that's the way my dad was like. After a game, I mean, that's the way I looked at my career and the way I played. I was always I was never like, okay, finally, you know, I've arrived. I mean, that's the way I need to play. I never felt that way. Yeah, was I content at times? But I always pushed myself. So what he would do or say didn't really bother me a whole lot, because I was still, you know, internally was the same way. But I did, at times would be like thinking, I wouldn't say anything, but I'd be thinking, you know, I mean, a good job would be good to hear right now, you know, like, or you played well. Mm-hmm. But, boy, you know, it wasn't bad, but you can play a little bit better than that. Or what happened on that one play? I'd be like, it might be 70 good plays and there was one bad one. And he would bring that to light. And I, you know, I think part of growing up, part of being a parent, is learning from your mistakes, learning from what your parents say, or as a parent, learning from past mistakes that maybe your parents made or said, you know, it was tough love. I mean, and he was a coach first with me, and I would say to him at times, like when I was playing high school football for him, I'd say, Dad, I think we ought to throw it some. Well, I think you ought to let me run the damn team, and you do what I say. And I'm like, you know, kind of the gee, thanks. You know, I wouldn't say that, but I'm like, if you want your son to get a scholarship, now I wouldn't say that to him, but I'm thinking to myself, surely he wants me to get a scholarship. He's got to throw the ball. But long story short, it worked out, and we didn't throw the ball, and that makes him look like,
well, right.
Dude, rock me.
Except it did almost prevent you from getting a scholarship, because you did have this strong arm.
Yeah,
and
but he didn't
nobody
look
could
at it
see
that way.
Until,
You're
right.
absolutely right.
Right.
You know,
Right.
to him almost was 100% guarantee.
Right.
You know, it all worked out in the end, and that's the way he looked at things, that he didn't have to change his coaching style or whatever. And I do know that he was not going to change, even if it was for the better of the team, in regards to his son. So he was not going to throw, even if it would have helped the team, because he didn't want people to think that he was playing favoritism to his son, and that's wrong. But you know, I'm not saying let's do what's best for me and the heck with the rest of the team, but you should. I mean, you should help your son out if he's the best player, and but yet I'm gonna stick to my guns. And it was a crazy thing. My older brother played for him. They threw it all the time, and I was a much better thrower than my brother. He may say differently.
You think he was tougher on you?
Oh, absolutely. And Scott, my older brother, and Jeff, my younger brother, would probably say the same thing. For whatever reason, only he could answer that. Of course, he's gone now, but only he could answer that. I just think that he saw maybe more in me, not anything against my two brothers, Scott and I were a lot alike size-wise, throwing. I probably was a little bigger and maybe a little more physical than him. I was taller than Jeff, but maybe Dad saw something in me that set me apart from those two. I don't know. And so maybe he was hard on me because of that.
You were out on a golf course and you know, didn't have your cell phone with you. Your wife calls the teammate that you're with, and he turns to you and tells you the tragic news that your father had passed away, had a heart attack. You have Monday Night Football the next day that you're supposed to be playing in, and are left with the decision of whether to play in the game or fly home to Mississippi. Why do you decide to play?
It was easy. It was a tough choice, but it was an easy choice, if that makes any sense. Up to that point, any conversations with my dad always involved football. As far back as I could remember, and as I look back at even today, if I saw a picture of me as a child before, you know, I could remember, and I just see a picture, it has to do with football or baseball. Not working on the truck, not sawing down trees, not you know, going to a business meeting. You know, it was football or baseball, and that's what we did. That's who we were. That's what we talked about. And when I say that that's what he would have wanted me to do, that's the truth. Tough to do it in those circumstances, but that was I look at it this way. Thankfully for me, I was not in the situation of my two brothers and my sister to have to be there, where I could kind of get away from it. There's nothing I could do by being there. But I was so relieved, not necessarily at that moment, but as I look back on that moment, I was so relieved that I had football to take me away from that. You know, I had something to distract my mind. And all the teammates, it was such an amazing moment in such a tragic circumstance to see how the guys rallied around me. And I really, at that point, really understood what a team and a family really was about. Now the tough part was, I knew I needed to play, I knew I wanted to play, but I didn't want to play and play bad. I felt like playing bad was not honoring my dad. Playing at a high level was. But, you know, I could have never have imagined to play the way I did. I was so fearful that I would just lay an egg, understandably so. I was more fearful of that, more so than that I would have played the way I did.
And that's apparently the only game you've ever been really scared for, leading into.
Yeah, you know, that was by far the most nervous I've ever been for a game, Super Bowls included. I think the only one that would be close would be Green Bay and Lambeau when I was with Minnesota. But still, you know, the pressure that I felt to play the best I've ever played right after my dad died was, I can't even relate to you how that felt. And because of that, I don't think there's a whole lot of good that comes out of like a scared type of nervousness. I think there is a fine line there. And I thought I was on the I'm going to screw up side more than I was on it's okay to be a little nervous and anxious and excited, but I fell more on the I'm going to lay an egg, and that's never a good approach.
I don't believe you like giving speeches, but you asked the head coach to speak to the team. What did you say?
You know, I don't even remember exactly what I've only done that a couple of times as a leader of the team for 20 years. The guys that I played with would probably tell you Brett didn't talk very much. Now, when I played, I was probably more vocal. I was never a rah-rah guy, but I was always a motivational guy, but in the moment, not like prior to the game. You didn't see me call the team up and give this Newt Rockne type of speech. It just wasn't my nature, even though I wasn't a quiet guy. I would kind of turn into a different guy. Like once, I was never controversial until a game. I would yell at a referee or get hostile, where if I saw the guy on the street, I would never complain about a call. Mm-hmm. That was just not my nature, and that's the way I was with speaking with the team. And you know, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I think it was probably along the lines of I'm not sure how I play. You know, more or less what I've told you, that I want to play at a high level for obvious reasons, but we still had a chance for the playoffs. I do remember that. We needed to win that game and the next game and need some help from other teams. So it was crucial that we won. And I didn't want to take away or distract from what our main focus was, and that's to get to the playoffs. And I think the guys that I played with over the years would say that's true, that his focus was the team. And so I didn't want to take away, but I needed the guys' help more than anything. I need your help to carry me through. I don't want to play bad and hurt this team, and you say, well, you had an excuse. I didn't want an excuse, but I did need their help, and that's more or less what I tried to get across.
As the players are running out, you're playing in Oakland, the Raiders fans are booing player after player after player. Then you come out. Mm-hmm. What's the crowd reaction?
Well, it was literally a standing ovation, and you're right. Even in the best of circumstances, for their home team, they don't get that type of response.
Right.
So and if Deanna was here right now, she'd tell you the same thing. The response from the Oakland fans was, I mean, whether it was Oakland or anywhere else, it just happened to be Oakland, which makes it even more impressive because of how tough they are. The respect that they gave was unbelievable. We had a police escort after us because Deanna and I chartered a plane. We flew back to Green Bay. It was right before Christmas. We got Christmas presents from under the tree. We loaded them up in a plane and we went to Mississippi for the funeral and the wake. So it was a crazy couple of days. But so right after the game, instead of flying back with the team, we went ahead right away, and they gave a police escort that would make, I think, the president blush. I mean, it was that special. I mean, it was, and it started with the standing ovation as I run out. You know, and I've played in Oakland a fair amount. It ain't usually that way. So I was truly thankful to the city of Oakland.
You had 399 yards, 4 touchdowns, one of the finest performances mm-hmm. of your career. How much did that mean to you?
Oh my goodness. It was better. What I had envisioned, or how I had envisioned playing, which obviously was good. I had envisioned playing well. It was not, so I far exceeded what I had hoped how I would play. You know, I mean, there were some of the best throws. As I think back to that game, there were a couple throws that would rank as maybe some of my best ever.
Really?
But there were also some that had no chance of being caught by our guys, but yet they were. And so it was just one of those nights.
You started for a record 18 and a half years straight in the NFL, 297 games or 321 games, including playoffs. What's the most difficult part of, and I should say, that's the record that you're mm-hmm. most proud of. Mm-hmm. What's the most difficult part of doing that?
Boy, I don't, I could give you a long list. Physically, I would think if you polled 10 people who knew a little bit about football and you said, what would be the toughest? You probably would get, well, physically, I would say from 8 out of 10 would probably say physically, the demand that you face week in, week out, that it's somewhere along the way, you're going to get hurt bad enough to not play, whether you want to play or not. That something's going to happen. And I would say that would be the case. The law of averages is going to catch up with you 18 and a half years. you sprain an ankle, bad enough, you tear a knee ligament, you break a thumb, and I say that because I did all those.
Right.
Or you come down with the flu so bad, you would think there was times that when I broke my thumb, for example, I didn't think, okay, the streak's over.
Thumb on the throwing hand.
Thumb on the throwing hand. If you'd have asked me or said to me before I'd ever broken my thumb, if you said, what would you think a broken thumb when you throw in hand would be enough to keep you out? And I'd say, well, absolutely. A thumb on my throwing hand? I mean, I'm done. But yet I ended up playing and playing great with that. A torn knee ligament. I can't tell you how many times I've hurt my ankle. I can't tell you how many times I separated my shoulders, had concussions. But mentally, in order to play that long, just say you withstand the physical part of it, it's tough to be good week in, week out, consistently long enough that they don't have to worry about that position where they just, he's got that handled. If you go 4 or 5 weeks in a row where you absolutely suck, they're gonna play someone else. They have to. You can't go in a slump for too long. And so from that standpoint, so physically, if you're okay, it's being good consistently enough for a long time.
Well, it's interesting you say that because your brother has said before that part of the reason behind the streak is, if you go down, that gives somebody else an opportunity to start at quarterback. And if you don't go down, somebody else doesn't have that opportunity. So how much was there that as sort of motivation?
I always had the little man on my shoulder saying, remember how you played. You came in the game because the guy in front of you got hurt. And no one knew who you were, and now no one knows who he is. And that's the way it works. And so you need to always be looking over your shoulder. And even when I had won 3 MVPs in a row, from the outside looking in, you may have thought, that guy's not worried about his job. I always was worried about my job. Because I was naive and, come across as old, country dumb guy, but I knew that you were a play away from never playing again. And someone else comes in and their first throw is a touchdown and the crowd goes wild and it's not about you and how quickly they can forget you. I knew that. I knew that. And so I always reminded myself of that and always pushed myself and motivated myself to never. If I could get myself up and come back and play, I didn't necessarily do it because I didn't want the other guy to play, although that was part of it. I did it because I loved to play and I wanted the guys to be able to count on me no matter what, and I took a lot of pride in that. But I also knew that they'll forget you pretty quickly.
What expectations did you have for yourself when you entered the NFL?
I tell people this all the time. I played 20 years. There wasn't a day that went by in my growing up in Mississippi that I did not dream of playing football. But I never dreamed, all the dreams that I had about football were all, and not too many people can say this, first of all came true, but were far exceeded by what I actually accomplished. And that's such an amazing thing, because most people, it's like, I dreamed of this, but I never got that chance or whatever. For me, I dreamed of playing in the National Football League. I loved Archie Manning. I was a Saints fan. It was tough back then, but I was a Cowboys fan. I loved Roger Staubach, and I was both of those guys. I was out in the yard all the time. Last second, I was running around, and I just envisioned being them. Running out on the field in the Superdome as a Saint, like Archie Manning did, running out as Roger Staubach, and that's really what I dreamed of. I didn't dream of winning 3 MVPs. I didn't dream of playing 297 straight games. I didn't dream. I did dream of playing the Super Bowl, but I didn't. Pro Bowls, all those other things, I didn't. Hall of Fames, all that never crossed my mind. I just wanted to play. And then before I knew it, all this other stuff had happened. And so my expectations were to always play. And whatever came along with it, came along with it. But it's such an amazing thing to say that you outdid your dream.
How competitive are you?
Well, I don't know how competitive I am now.
What
I probably still am. It's just hard to, how do you relate that to playing in the National Football League? But when I was playing, I think that's what set me apart from most of the guys. It wasn't that I was the tallest, the fastest, the biggest, the smartest, but I was the most competitive. I was determined, and that, and then that filters down. Okay, what does that necessarily mean? That, competitive it's such a vague word. I knew no one wanted to win as bad as I wanted to win. I just knew that, and I was determined that whatever I had to do to win, I was going to do. If I had to block, if I had to hand off, if I had to throw, if I had to come from behind, if I had to work harder than the next guy, whatever I had to do, I was going to do.
I heard a story that you challenged a teammate to a punt, kick, and pass contest, outside of
it was a pass contest.
A pass contest, and he ends up beating you, and you're furious afterwards.
Well,
how
actually, the
true
one
is
I'm
that?
thinking of, he didn't beat me.
Okay.
It was actually a good friend of mine, Billy Joe Tolliver, who we're still great friends today, and he was so much like me, it wasn't funny, because he thought he was the best. He thought he should have been a starter. He was second string, I was third string in Atlanta. And we were so much alike, we hated each other. I mean, technically we didn't hate each other, but we fought about everything. Mm-hmm. And he had a great arm, he did.
Is there a downside to being that competitive?
I don't know. I'm sure there's a downside to anything. It worked for me. It's a little more disheartening when you lose something, when you're so competitive, because it matters so much to you. And the littlest things matter to you. And my wife is ultra competitive too. And so even when we're on teams, we're competing against each other, and that's, so I think the downside, if there is one, is that when you playing checkers, you love to play, you love to compete. You lose at checkers. I mean, it's not life or death, but you get the point. I mean, but again, stuff matters to you. I think it should. Some matter more than others. Winning the Super Bowl matters more than winning a game of checkers, I would think. But I think the really good players, I would say most of them are super competitive because it really matters to them. Not only does it matter winning or losing, but being the best, or being an impact player, being the one who, I wanted to be the one who had the ball. I wanted to be the one who made a difference or did make a difference. Of course, I wanted to make a difference in a positive way. I wanted to win the game. I didn't want to be watching.
Right.
I wanted, as tough as it may be, I wanted to be the one out there who determined whether we won or lost.
What do you think's responsible for your success?
I think God more than anything. There's some things we can control, some things we can't control, and the good Lord had blessed me with, and it happens to a lot of people, they're blessed with something maybe that they know they have, and then in some cases they don't know they have, and it's up to parents or a coach or a teacher or something to bring that out of them. And of course my dad brought that out of me, but I knew I had a gift. I didn't know how far it would take me, but I knew I could throw better than anyone. Now, accuracy and learning to read defenses and all those things had to come along with it, but there was no one could out-throw me. And I was this little skinny kid. It's like when I went to the LSU football camp as a 15-year-old kid, they walked past me and didn't think twice about me. I was that big around, had freckles. My knees were actually bigger than my thighs. I mean, I came down and kind of did like this. And again, I would be the one picked last on, but when I threw it, everyone stopped and was like, whoa, who is this? And I knew that set me apart. And in this determination, I knew that I had, that there was never one day that went by, and I honestly can say that I didn't think I wouldn't make it. Imagine how disheartening it would have been had I not made it. But there was never doubt. That's the thing that I think about that is just as amazing to me, that not one day went by that I thought, the chances are not good. I always thought the chances were good.
You mentioned your MVPs, and there's one year in particular I want to ask you about, because as part of the preparation for this interview, I just found it impressive and extraordinary what you went through, and the fact that you were still able to have great success that year. You won an MVP, and then have success in the seasons after that, and that's 1996. The first 9 months of the year were presumably really tough on you. Your now wife and daughter almost leave because of your painkiller addiction. Your sister was arrested for being in the car during a drive-by shooting. Your brother drives drunk, gets in an accident that kills your close friend. What was the difficulty like for you involved with going through all that?
Well, I thank God that I made it through, but and I don't want to sound like, I don't want to say that selfishly, because there were other people involved in all this that were directly affected or indirectly affected by the trickle-down effect, if you will. The one constant through all that was football, and it was for me, it was a good place to escape. And I shouldn't say hide, but I was able to it was kind of like talking to someone when I played football. It's kind of like going back to, talking about when my dad passed away. I would much rather have been playing than to sit in a funeral home. And that's just me. It gave me a way to escape, but also feel like I was actually doing something good, or trying to do something good. And it just so happens that was the year we won the Super Bowl. Go figure. I say this more so lately, that as I've gotten older, my belief in God has gotten stronger, but God's timing is not our timing. And that's a perfect example of, why me, or and then all of a sudden, like you go from the worst to the best feeling, and oh, sorry, God, but life goes on, and we sure have, and I sure have faced my demons and circumstances, not unlike a lot of other people. It's just that some people you don't know about. But being able to overcome those and doing something positive with your life is the most important thing. Not necessarily how many football games you've won, but just, I think, in a daily walk with the people you confront, what type of impact do you leave on them. And so I felt like football was a way to, it wasn't really my focus, but it was I realized that over time that I made a positive impact on people. Now, if I sucked, it would be different. But fortunately, I didn't suck enough that I was able to withstand.
I read the book you wrote many years back, and I was really surprised by how open and honest you were about the Vicodin addiction, which also 96, same period. What led to all of that happening, in your opinion?
I don't think I can put my finger on one particular thing, other than pain pill addiction obviously started because of pain. Now, there came a point, and I don't know exactly when that point was, where it wasn't about the pain anymore, it was about the effect. And what started out as harmless, I mean, a sprained ankle, my ankle's killing me, or a separated shoulder, you take, rightfully so, you take a couple of pain pills, get through the night. And by no means am I blaming it on any person or football itself. It's just, and some people more prone to addictions than others. I mean, I could almost teach a class on addictions, not that I'm an expert, but somewhere in your genetic makeup, you're probably more susceptible to addictions than others, and you just need the right opportunity, to kickstart it. And in my case, that probably, was first separated shoulder or ankle, or then it got to where you become a great manipulator. And
In what ways?
when you were not hurt, I needed a couple more pain pills, man. My shoulder's killing me. Who's going to argue?
To what extent did you feel like at the time that you needed it to play well?
I don't think I needed it. Well, it's been a long time, but I knew what I was doing. I knew that I didn't necessarily need it, but I sure liked the way it felt. And I knew it was wrong.
How did it feel?
Well, with that, I tell people all the time that I took 15 biking and ES at one time, and they're like, "That didn't knock you out?" And I said, "It did totally the opposite. I was up. And that's kind of the way with addictions too. I mean, what it's supposed to do, it doesn't. So when you take 2 pain pills, you're knocked out, and you don't feel pain. You wake up, 4, 5, 6, 8 hours later. I would be up and just talking, and I didn't want to sleep until about 10 o'clock the next morning when we were in offensive meetings. It was about the only time I wanted to sleep. Not a good time to want to sleep. And I'd doze off, leaning back into like a coat rack in our quarterback's meeting room. And so, it was, and this went on for a long time. It wasn't just 96.
How long?
That's when people knew about it,
Right.
because of the announcement. I don't know. It started 3 years before, maybe. I was taking pain pills before that, but maybe not abusing them. It took a while before there's probably this period where you don't really know that you're abusing them. You don't really know that you're manipulating the system. And then there comes a point where you go, I really don't need these. But when that exactly was, I don't know. Again, it was a long time ago. But
How long were you taking 15 a day for?
I don't remember how the dynamics of it worked, but say 2 gave me an effect that I liked. After a month, 2 didn't do anything, so you needed 3, and it may have been less than that. Mm-hmm. And then 4, and then maybe so on and so forth. And again, I don't remember how long it took before you had to graduate up to more, but I knew that 15 was hard to come by.
It's hard to get access to.
A month's prescriptions is 30. What is it? 30 pills or something. Depending on what they prescribe for you. And I was going through that in 2 days.
Wow.
So I was having to hustle a lot. I'd ask this guy for pills, and that guy for pills, and that guy for pills, and after a while it got. I was going back around pretty quickly.
Did people start scratching their heads?
I thought no.
What?
I was the last one to know. It's one of those things that no one knows what's going on. But like my wife said, she goes, everyone knew. But I thought no one knew.
You mentioned sleep. I think that one of the side effects was you only sleep like 2 hours a night, caused you to throw up a lot. You would drink like gallons of water, yet you wouldn't even be able to pee, apparently.
The adverse effects probably it was probably good that I was 23, 24, 25 years old, because
Right.
you can overcome a lot because of your age. If I sleep 5 hours now, I'm terrible the next day. I need to, it's
Right.
harder as a 40-year-old or more to get a good night's sleep for whatever reason. You wake up, I guess you got to go to the bathroom. But now, not drinking, not taking pain pills, all that stuff, I feel pretty good. But even then, I think back and I go, wow, how in the world did I do it?
What happened at the 96 ESPYs that made your wife confront you about it?
I probably about like some of the other times where I just had taken too many pain pills and drank at the same time. Not a good combination. One of them is not a good, is a good thing to do. And just, I can't. I vaguely remember that situation. But I mean, I probably had promised her that I wouldn't take pain pills, and again, thought I had everything under control, and probably was throwing up and self-destructing, much like I had before. And I'd had 2 seizures after this incident that you're talking about. One was in the hospital in Green Bay after an ankle surgery, and I woke up, all these doctors, and Deanna and our oldest daughter, Brittany's like, it looked like, someone had died. And I'm like, what's the deal? And they said, you just had a seizure. I'm like, for what? And then I had another one at our house in Green Bay 2 nights before one of our games. And all this was a result of a lack of sleep, which was brought upon because of pain pills. So, I mean, I was getting, and I just remember a meeting with all kinds of doctors and neurologists, and not to sound like a doctor, but more or less what I was told was your brain is a computer. Yours is short-circuiting because of a lack of sleep. You need sleep, and so I like to sleep as much as the next person, but I like the effect of pain pills more at the time. So it was a dangerous game. And so the second one really, you think the first one would scare you enough.
It was the second one?
The second one scared me enough. I thought, because it wasn't that far apart from the first one. And one seizure, when you're not a seizure person, should be scary enough, but that really struck fear in me.
How'd you quit?
You know what? I'd love to give you some big formula how I quit, but I had about 4 pills left and was trying to figure out how I was going to get more pills again. And I don't remember the day or the exact moment, but it was, not long after, actually right before we won the Super Bowl, somewhere in that time frame. And I had kind of hit rock bottom. I mean, I shouldn't even say kind of. I mean, even though things around me seemed like they were good, internally I'd hit rock bottom, and I said, I'm going to flush these down the toilet, the remainders. And I remember when I poured them in the toilet and it started to flush, I almost crawled in the toilet to go after them, because I thought, what in the world did you just do? I mean, I just had such a dependency on those. And I was taking 15 a night. Any expert would tell you that's not the way to wean yourself off of. You should start with 12 maybe, and then 10, and slowly decrease. I just went cold turkey, and I don't say that braggingly, but I know that was the worst month as far as any kind of recovery that I've ever went through. I shook every night, cold sweats, and just, it was a constant battle. A month or 2 of what I do now. And then now I can't believe I ever drank. So, there's that window that if you can get past, that's the way I look at it, if you can get past that hump, and it's different for everyone, but you can do it. I mean, it's been so long that I think people who are close to me, even would almost say, you know, it wasn't that bad.
People have forgotten.
Well, I mean, it's been over 20 years. You know, drinking is closing in on 20 years. I mean, I quit in '98. Haven't had a drop since. Haven't missed it. First couple months I did, but now, I mean, you can drink. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I'm not going to drink. I don't want to. I'm not going to. I can say that in front of you, or when I'm by myself driving home. I don't say, well, maybe one. I'm to a point where I'm beyond that. It's been a long time ago, but I had my wisdom teeth cut out after I'd quit taking pain pills. And I wanted to take pain pills.
Oh, that had to be hard, right?
That was extremely hard. That was probably the toughest test I'd ever had. My mouth hurt so bad, but I just, and you know, I think you gain something in those times. I don't recommend, you know, putting yourself through those struggles all the time, but when you win those battles, you become stronger. And I can't tell you how many times after games since I'd quit taking pain pills that it crossed my mind, and I was like, nah, you know, it wasn't. I mean, I had the upper hand on it by that time.
What do you remember from blacking out on the final snap of your career?
I just remember when there was no pain. Guy pushed me. We were playing at the University of Minnesota, playing in Chicago, harmless. You know, I'd love to say that the guy hit me hard, but it was just a push. And the field was solid ice almost. Hard, cold. Threw a little swing route to the left. The guy pushed me, and I just kind of slipped and lost my footing. And I fell over and just hit the left side of my head, which that's probably been done thousands of times. And the next thing I remember, I was snoring. Our trainer had came out on the field, Eric Sugarman, we call him Shug, and he's like, hey buddy, you all right? I was kind of laying on my stomach with my head turned to my right a little bit, and I was snoring. I was taking a good nap. And he says, you all right? And I said, hey, I was snoring. It's kind of like he woke me up. And he said, I know buddy, you had a concussion. And I thought, no pain, nothing. It was just, in fact, I'd kind of warmed up a little bit. I was freezing before then. And I got up and I kind of looked over and I said, a couple of Bears, Urlacher and Lance Briggs, a few of those guys were clapping. I said, what are they doing here? And I think I took one step towards the Bear sideline, and Shug said, oh, come over here with me, buddy. And went straight to the sideline. And I said, let's go on into the locker room. I figured after 20 years, I should be able to say what I want to do. Went right in, took a shower, put my street clothes on, got a jacket, got a hot chocolate and a chili dog, and I never looked back. Never missed it since.
Versus New England in 2010, tell about why you were thinking fireworks were going off.
Oh yeah, it was the only time, first of all, in 20 years that I was ever cut anywhere, and I was cut right here on my chin, which you would think as a quarterback, you play 20 years, you'd catch a helmet to the chin, and
sure,
that would happen more than one occasion, but no. It's kind of like the writing on the wall. The week before against Green Bay, I'd broke my foot, broke my calcaneus, which I didn't even know what a calcaneus was. It's your heel bone.
Okay.
Give you a little
learn something new every day.
Anatomy lesson. But the next week I go and I play against New England. We don't have a chance for playoffs. I mean, my foot's broken. I'm thinking, why am I even trying to play? Who am I trying to impress here? John Wayne. So I play, and I ended up playing well. We got a chance to win. We're driving late in the game. My good friend Steve Hutchinson, a great player. He's our left guard. Been a great player for a long time. Was outstanding. He one of the few times in his career he ever whiffed on a guy. He misses his guy completely, and I'm like on the 3-yard line. I see his guy coming, and I throw it. As soon as I throw it, man, the lights went out, and then kind of like fireworks went off, and I get hit right in the chin. And Steve's like over the top of me. When I look up, and he's like, "Hey, man, you all right?" And I said, "What is fireworks going off for?" And he's like, "Ah, you just got hit in the chin. I'm sorry." And he said, "Man, you're bleeding bad." And I was like, man, my chin was killing me, and I had a gash like that had opened up like that wide, and there was meat hanging out of it. Went right in and got it sewed up. My oldest daughter was there at the game. She came down while they were sewing me up, and I remember looking at her and said, "Brittany, this is it." You know, I mean, of course, I think everyone else knew it was it too, but I knew. Broken foot, first time I've ever been cut, not along with that, a concussion. I mean, it was not to mention age, it was just time. It seems like, you know, when it rains, it pours, and the injuries. Injuries at 21 are a lot easier to deal with than they are at 41.
How many concussions do you think you got during your career?
Here's where the problem to me lies. Not that it really matters at this point. What's done is done. But what is technically, scientifically, or medically a concussion? We know when you see a guy or a boxer, for example, get knocked out. That's a concussion. But what about when you get hit, and like in football, a lot of times you don't know it. I'm watching now, and I think he might, to myself, he may have had a concussion. You'll see a guy get up, and it's when, you know, bells are ringing a little bit, or you know, like flash bulbs are going off, and that's stuff that people don't see. You see when someone's out cold and they get up and they don't know what sideline to go to. That's easy. I guess my point is, of the true, he's got a concussion where the outside looking in knows 2, 3 maybe. But what about the ones that I got up, ran the next play, you never thought anything of it, but, you know, the old saying, bell was ringing. Endless. No telling. And my understanding, as we find out more about those, the toll of those may be even greater than the big ones. But again, there's nothing you can do about it.
How would it affect you whether you got a concussion that everybody knows about, or you got one that nobody knew about?
You know, I didn't think much about it. I mean, this was at a time, and you know, it's not that long since I retired, but I'm talking about back in college and early part of pro career, that you were a sissy, pardon my term there, but you were a sissy if your bell was rung and you let that keep you out. And you know, everyone reacts to different to pains or hits or something differently. What may keep one guy out of a game, the next guy may not be out of play. And you know, early in my career, I was taking pain pills. I don't know what normal felt like. I couldn't tell you if I had a concussion and I felt woozy because of a concussion, or if it was because of pain. I have no idea. I would probably say the pain pills. But there were times after I'd gotten clean and sober that I did have what would be borderline concussion, I guess. And I had headaches for a day or two. I don't know if, it's hard to say if it ever affected the way I played. I'd have to go back and, you know, it may be too far gone to see if that day or two after, if there's really, they're just starting to learn the effects of concussions, and it's not good. That's the scary thing.
How concerned are you about the long-term side effects?
You know,
of
only
playing?
when I do interviews like this.
Okay. When us dumb media types bring it up.
I jokingly say, but that is partly, there's really not a whole lot I can do. Worrying, as we tell our youngest daughter all the time, no sense in worrying about something you can't control. Right now, you know, there's no sense in worrying. I mean, I can't say I feel normal. I don't know what normal, but I feel pretty good mentally and physically. And so, cross that bridge when we get to it.
Do you have any side effects now?
I don't know. You know, it's like after you have a concussion in the National Football League, you have to take a baseline test. But you have to have a starting point. And for us older players, they started this like when I was in my 15th year. So there's 15 years of wear and tear that we don't know. Now, if you're, you know, if you've never had a concussion, you take this test, you got a pretty good starting point. and you get what we think is a concussion, and next time you take the test and you score considerably lower, your motor skills are out of whack, we kind of know where you are and what the effect of getting hit in the head has on you. With me, it's the way it is. The protocol now is a lot better, but it doesn't help the older guys a lot. In fact, coming back from the movies last night, Deanna said, you tell. I was talking about an old story that she knew about that I don't know how it came up. And I was like, yeah. And she goes, that's not the way it went. And I said, surely it is. I'm the one who the story's about, but I couldn't remember. I can remember, but it's not right. And she said, well, I got news for you. All the stories you tell are not right. Who am I to argue? But is that age? Is that concussions? Is that both? Or is that just I'm a terrible storyteller?
Right.
I say all of the above. I think I'm a pretty good storyteller, even though they're not necessarily right all the time.
So there isn't, though, any obvious memory
Headaches,
loss or pain that...
No.
Okay.
No.
You said before, if you had a son, you probably wouldn't let him play football.
I don't
Why
know.
not?
Yeah, I mean, I told Matt Lauer that, and maybe what I should have said is, and maybe I did say it, but it would be tough. I don't see how I could not let him play, because I can't make him not play, but if he chose not to, I don't think I would be that upset. And for two reasons. The expectations would be, if he never, in my mind, I may be proud of him, but to everyone else, if he doesn't exceed what I did, then he's a failure. Not everybody can be Peyton and Eli, and outdo what their dad did. So from that standpoint, I would hate for him to be faced with that. Why, your dad did this, why didn't you do that? So on and so forth. But also the physical effect. As we're just finding out, I mean, I know football's a violent sport, and I would have trouble watching him as it's kind of talking earlier about the things we did as a kid, and now as an adult, I'm thinking, my goodness, I can't believe I did that. Or I'd be worried sick about my kids. That's the way I would feel as I watched him play. Just hate for him to get hit, worried about him getting up, not getting up, the cumulative effect of that, not to mention the pressure he would face daily to be the best.
Aaron Rodgers, he has, made it pretty clear that when you guys were playing, when you were the starter, when he was the backup, you guys really didn't have much of a relationship. Why do you think that was?
That's not uncommon. We watched film together. His locker was, like right there from mine. We were in meetings together daily. Other than that, that's not uncommon. A lot of the guys that I played with, quarterback-wise, I probably spent more time with Aaron than I did with those. I mean, the exception would be Doug Peterson, who was a longtime backup and great friend, and Matt Hasselbeck, and those two played with me for 10 years or more. And they wear on you, or I wear on them. I mean, you can't help but be around each other, but that's not uncommon. That has nothing to do with, not to mention, I'm much older than him. I shouldn't say much, but I'm considerably older than him, and what he does and what I do are different when you leave the building. His likes are different than my likes, but I would always, if I was watching film, which I watched a lot of film by myself, and I can remember on numerous occasions, hey, what you watching? Come on in. So, I wouldn't say, hey, no, that's just not me. I never felt threatened my job, although I knew that at some point I would not be the starter in Green Bay. I knew that.
Well, and that's I guess the question that some people would have. Do you think there was any hesitation on your end to be closer because you knew this was a guy that was brought in to ultimately take over for you?
No.
Okay.
No, I really didn't. When they drafted him in the first round, that's usually a good sign that they're preparing for the end and the beginning, if you will.
How did you feel about it when it happened?
I was surprised it took that long, really, but I was proud of the fact that it took that long. Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of first-round picks come and go at different positions, but quarterback was not one of them. So I was proud of that. First-round pick comes up, they don't pick a quarterback. It wasn't like I was like, yes. I just didn't think twice about it. And that went on for a long time. Mm-hmm. So the one constant was I was going to be the quarterback, and everyone was okay with that, and that was a good feeling.
To what extent do you think you could have been a better mentor to him than you were?
I think I was. I think a lot of it falls on, I don't know what the consensus feeling is of the general public in this regard. I mean, I've kind of been asked this question. It's been talked about in the past. And I don't know where the present starter, like myself in that case, is paid to be a mentor, so to speak, or if that's part of the job description. I don't think I think there's a misconception. Maybe there's a misconception. I don't know him or anyone else anything other than, in my opinion, being a nice guy and being thoughtful and honest. But I don't have to give him any insights to what I do or don't do. That being said, I was, and I guess backing up, I think the mentorship, whether you're the mentor or the one being mentored, so to speak, I think it falls more on the person who is being mentored or wants to be, rather than the old vet. I think the young guy, it's up to him to at least ask. And
I have no opinion in this argument, but there are some that would say, you're the legend, the face of the franchise. It should be on you to be the one reaching out.
Why? I asked that, why?
Well, he's a young guy, doesn't maybe have the confidence to go up to a Brett Favre. And
I think as a starter, my job's hard enough to win ball games and be a leader. I'm not, you're not a babysitter. And I'm not by no means talking about Aaron, but he's the starter now. So the next quarterback comes in, whether he's a first-round pick or third-round pick or a free agent, but they like him. Nowhere does it say that you have to take that guy under your wing and teach him the ropes. You don't have to do anything but win ball games for whoever it is you're the starting quarterback for. Ultimately, that's what keeps you around or doesn't.
Right.
That's the bottom. Whether or not you take a guy under your wing means really nothing. And so, it's, if there is a belief out there that I did not help not only Aaron Rodgers or help other players, first of all, that's wrong. To what extent did I help him? Heck, I don't know. How does that compare to other guys across the league? I don't know.
How much do you think all of it's just been fed by the media?
I think most of it is.
Okay.
And that could be a lot of stuff. Controversy sells. It's interesting. Like the two guys that get along and work well together. Who wants to read about that?
Right.
Who cares? But the two guys who are giving each other the finger and talking bad about this, that's what we want. So I think that in that regards, the media fuels a lot of it.
Well, and it's interesting you say that too, because it leads in perfectly to this topic, and that being retirement. You have to wonder how much of that was really fed and progressed by the media. But why do you think you went back and forth so much about whether to retire?
Peyton is sort of in some ways is facing kind of what I faced. Made a terrible loss. The questions are just bombarding you. No, even if he's not in a press conference, wherever he goes. There was a time, and I believe it or not, still to this day, may go somewhere, and it's few and far between where someone say, I'm hoping you come back. I mean, it's crazy, but I still get that. So imagine like when I first retired. Like,
Well, it's not that crazy. You got called by the Rams not too long ago.
Well, but just the constant and not to mention your own, you look in the mirror and you go, what am I going to do? I don't know. You have to face that with everyone. You leave out of the house, hey, well, you coming back for another year? What? I mean, it's just, and when you're at, there's no way I can explain to you the feeling because it's only happened to a few guys, but when you're 40 years old, 37, 38, 30, whatever, and you lose a game like Peyton lost or I lost against New Orleans, the last thing you want to think about is football, even though that's the only thing you're going to think about, unfortunately. You're going to think about what you should have done, how you could have done it. The redemption part of it comes to mind, like we were so close, I know, but do I want to put myself through that again and have heartbreak yet again? Do I? Do I want to go through, do I want to start over and do all this again? And then you stop and you go, and can I do it daily and physically like I want to do it? Because each year, that becomes tougher and tougher. Your mind tells you can, but maybe your body's not cooperating. And so that was my dilemma. I mean, I didn't want to think about it. And so when I was asked, and you almost hate the question and you almost hate the answer, whatever it may be, yes or no. I am coming back. Then do I really want to do this? Then you say, no, I don't want to come back right now. And then later on, you're like, maybe I do have a little bit, so there's no way I can explain to you what that feels like. Because obviously I don't have it figured out myself.
Oh, no, it was interesting though watching an appearance you made on Letterman around that time. I think you just retired from the Packers, and I was watching the appearance the other day, and he's asking you about it. And even though you'd retired, it really didn't seem like you were confident in your decision to stay retired. But you retired, and then June 2008, you called the Packers head coach up and say you want to come back. What was said on that call?
Not a lot on my end. Mike was not too happy, but understandably so.
What did he say?
They had gone in a different direction, as you would imagine. And I threw a kink into the whole situation because the off season is not necessarily off season. You're preparing for next season, and you're kind of correcting and doing all the things that happened the previous season. Well, you can imagine, I'd been there 16 years, and now you're shifting gears. I mean, this is a big deal and going in a different direction with a different quarterback and probably a philosophy to a certain degree. So that was more or less what, Mike was saying in his way. And of course, there's two hard-headed people on the phone. I felt like I could still play, and I was wrong for retiring early, but I should have known, and he should have known. That was my thought process. Like, no one loves football in April or March. Better yet, a 40-year-old guy, a 37-year-old guy, I don't know of too many of them go, I can't wait for minicamp. I can't wait for OTAs. Gosh darn it, I love this. I don't know of too many. And when you've suffered a tough loss and a great season, but a devastating loss to end, I don't know of too many that are carry anything about it. But given time, that itch will come back a little bit. And it hasn't come back in 4 years, so I know I've made the right decision. I don't miss, when I saw Peyton lose the other day, I don't miss that one bit. there's always a chance you win, there's always a chance you lose. I don't want to take that chance. I know that. But then I did.
How much did you feel like you were forced into making your retirement decision initially
when
in
you
the
let
first
your
place?
emotions, rather than stopping and thinking, which is what I should have done, you don't do that. And I can only speak from my end. I should have stood my ground and not retired early. And gave it more time.
Stood your ground, what do you mean? There was pressure?
Well, Mike wanted to know, and that's as the head coach of the team, or Ted Thompson's job as a GM. I think rightfully so. They need to know which direction they're going to go in. But there was nothing in the rule books that said I had to give them an answer until the day of the training camp. Quite frankly, I could, day of training camp, say, I decided I don't want to play. That'd be kind of a cruel way to do it. Like you could have told us early so we could have prepared for this. Or, I could retire early and then have 4 months to think about it. And then all of a sudden, right when training camp starts, I could go, I kind of want to be there. Again, the last 4 years, I haven't wanted to be at training camp. I haven't missed it. So there wasn't this, boy, I wish I could, no. But once I kind of got over, if you want to call it get over, the loss to the Giants and thought, it was my best year. If you really want to think, in 16 years, it was my best year based on all the circumstances and stuff. That last year in Green Bay, that was my best year in 16 years. So you can imagine, like mentally, you're thinking, I'm still pretty good.
Right.
Whether you are or not, it's hard not to think that way. Now that doesn't.
You were.
I'm thinking I still am pretty good.
In the league, right.
Do I want to play or go to minicamp right now? No, I don't. So when Mike asked, and he asked several times, do I think what do I think? And I said, well, I don't know. I was good at that. And I knew a week was not going to change. Peyton in 5 weeks, because I heard what Elway said, in 5 weeks we'll readdress this. In 5 weeks, if he has a clear cut, I know what I'm going to do. It's no ifs, ands, buts. I know exactly. Then, he's better at it than I am. But that was the case for me. I knew that probably come July, I would have a pretty good, maybe June, I'd have a pretty good idea if I wanted to go through it, not March or April.
Right.
But at the time, they wanted an answer.
They were hammering you to give you.
And again, they're not wrong. And there is no right, there's nothing in the rule books that said, okay, if you don't give us an answer, they could have cut me.
Right.
If I didn't give an answer, or they could have just waited it out. And I just, honestly, at the time, I was not. I remember saying, Mike, if you really want an answer, right now I'm not 100% committed. I cannot commit. If you want to know right now, I'm not 100%. Can I be all in? No. Could I be in July? Maybe. But that's not an answer that was doable. So I don't blame them. It was bad for a while, and pointing fingers and all this stuff, but that's really how it went down. There was a better way to handle it, but it all worked out.
What was said in that several-hour meeting that you had in Green Bay?
Well, again, I don't want to stoke the fire, because it is what it is, and everything is fine now, because time heals everything, and I think for me, I felt like I admit that I was wrong in it retiring early, I was okay with the fact that they wanted to move on in a different direction. I really was, but I felt like, I think for me it was like, I'm not good enough to play here, but I'm too good to play against you mentality. That's kind of how I felt. That they didn't want to cut me because anyone could pick me up. And yeah, I could compete for the job in Green Bay, that was fine. But I just felt like I was not going to play there because they had already gone in a different direction, if you know what I mean, even though they were not going to cut me if I put them in that position. And I was wrong. And so that's kind of what we talked about in that meeting. And there was no easy resolution, put it that way. Because now as I look back, I try to put myself in their position. Now I kind of see it from their perspective, that it wasn't that I wasn't good enough to play for the Packers, but they had to figure out what they were going to do with Aaron. At some point, you have to go in a different direction, and that means at times making tough, hard decisions that not everyone agrees with, and that may be the fans or the player himself, and that was the case. But yet, in saying that, he played too well last year from a public standpoint to just let him go. So we're kind of, it's catch-22, you know, you damned you do, damned if you don't. Right. And I saw it more from just a selfish standpoint, like what.
Well, you felt, I mean, based on the success you'd had there, and for the 15+ years you'd had it, that you'd earned that right.
Yeah, and in the business world, that's not necessarily the case. Yeah, you may have been our best salesman for years, but you know, you're getting old, you don't move around like you used to. You're good, but we have to we can save money and see what our young guy can do, or we can hang on to the old mare. And so, I mean, but it's all good now.
You end up going to the Jets, play 1 season there, then play 2 seasons for the Vikings. Before the final season with the Vikings, I think you retired, then you unretired. There were 3 Vikings players, I think, that in August fly down to see you here in Hattiesburg to try and convince you to come back. Why ultimately decide to come back?
Well, you know what? We lost the Saints in the championship game. It was devastating. I was beat to hell. It was tough. But boy, we were close. I mean, really close. We were closer than Denver was against the Colts the other day. We were that close. And it was right there. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. That is so devastating. If you're 21, 25 years old, by the time you get back home from the trip, you almost forgot about it. It's like your kids, you know, you spank them, they cry. An hour later, you know, they forgot what happened. But as an adult who's played 19 years, I knew how hard it was. I knew that getting to that point in itself was such a good thing. Almost not impossible to repeat, but hard. I mean, 20 years, was fortunate to win the Super Bowl 1 time, went 1 other time, but I would have thought we'd have gone 12 other times, but that's what you get for thinking. So part of me was like, it's impossible to have this year. But then there was this other part of me that said, if you don't go back, you're always going to wonder, what if? And that is true. You know what people would have said? Had you come back, we'd have done it. We'd have gone, you know, we'd have gone to the Super Bowl. And I would have wondered, what if? Well, by going back, yeah, it was not a good year. You know, we didn't even have a winning record. But by going back, there is no what ifs. I will never have that looming. So I'm glad I went back. I wish the season would have ended up differently, but I know now. I know. There is no, if you'd have came back, we'd have won.
I mean, are you really glad, though, you came back? I mean, because you look at that season, and I mean, it was bad
I am. I really am.
I mean, you know, for obviously not fun topic, but there were sexual harassment allegations. Then you have, you know, you apparently clashed with the head coach. You had your worst quarterback rating and most interceptions a season after having the best in both categories. So, I mean, just all things considered.
I was beat to heck. I mean, I broke my foot, got my jaw, collarbone. But you know what? If we were sitting here right now and I didn't go back, I know what I would be thinking. You know, if I'd went back, we may have had a shot. And other people would, and I think that would eat at me forever, that if I'd have went back, we may have won it. Well, I know that now, that's not the case, but I'm able to live with that easier, I think, than always wondering what if.
Embarrassed at all by
No,
the last season?
No. You know, I mean, I'm not. You know, it was 4 years, and you want to be remembered as something, and I think that I've done that. I'm not perfect. I haven't. Don't claim to be, and you know, I'm not. I'm content with where I am.
Hard on the family at all?
Yeah, it was extremely hard. You know, just like the football family, they rely on you, and you let them down. You don't live up to expectations at times, and that's life in general. But things are much better now.
Your mom, and I love her because you read all these articles, and she's a great quote. She said she thought you should have retired after the final year in Green Bay. What do you think?
You know what I think? It doesn't matter. And I say this to like when I was coaching kids, or to our youngest daughter all the time. I'm like, really? Because people will say, and you may, or at least heard people say, like, if you could go back and you could do, people do that. And I'm one of those that goes, I don't even want to go there, because you can't do it. It doesn't matter. Whether I should have retired or not, I mean, that's not even for her to say, that's her opinion. But the bottom line is, I didn't. I played 3 more years.
You had
that we know.
Your
We
best
don't know
season, your second to last season, or one of your best.
And you know what? That's what matters, is what, you know, what happened, not what we think could have happened or should have happened. That really doesn't matter. So I don't even go there.
What made you really realize it was time to retire?
Well, I knew at 20 years that if I'd have had another good year, there would always been this, boy, you still got a little bit left in the tank. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, because the effect that it takes on the body and mentally, just over and over and over again, at some point you got to stop, you know. And the competitive spirit was always there. But I realized my last year, more than anything, and I got hit a bunch. It seemed like the really tough hits. But I realized I didn't like them. And for 19 years, I don't want to say I liked getting hit, but it really didn't bother me a whole lot. In fact, I kind of thrived on it. Like, oh yeah, that's all you got? Well, the last year was like, I didn't like that. You know, and I didn't have a lot of fight to prove them otherwise. And so when I would get hit, I would probably bounce up, maybe been a little slower. But what I was thinking mentally was like, the benefit, or the reap, the reward, the you know, the ups and downs, whatever you want to say, or not in the this is okay favor. You know, it's more the, I don't particularly like this. I don't, whether we win or not, I don't know if that offsets, you know, getting beat up. I was started to weigh in the pros and cons, and every time I got hit, I was like, okay, I could throw a touchdown pass after this. I don't know if that really outweighs the physical part of it. But it took 20 years for me to feel that way.
You're obviously one of the most iconic players in the game, and above and beyond the stats, you're the type of player that, you know, a parent who's coaching or has a young kid wants would encourage their child to be like, because, the mentality, the toughness. The Packers, obviously, in July, are going to be honoring you, inducting you into the Packers Hall of Fame, also retiring your number. How much will that mean to you?
It will mean as much as anything I've accomplished in my career, because that, obviously that's a culmination of that says, not that I need it to be said, but that really is the exclamation point on a wonderful career. And not that I ever needed that, but I'm honored to have played in Green Bay, but to be with Bart Starr and Ray Nitschke and Jerry Kramer, Herb Adderley, Willie Wood, Willie Davis. I mean, I can go on and on and on and on. Because I remember sitting on the sidelines, and I always considered myself an historian of the game. I mean, I knew a lot about the game. I didn't really know where Green Bay was growing up. I knew it was cold, I knew it was up north, but I couldn't really find it on the map. But I knew who Paul Hornung and Max McGee, and Jim Taylor. I mean, I Fuzzy Thurston. The list goes on. I knew who all those guys were, and so I was one of those. When I was still on the sidelines, I looked up and saw the stadium, the Ring of Honor, and I mean, it meant something. It really did. It may not mean a lot to some guys today. It's not for me to say, but for me, it meant something. And so to be thought of, and Green Bay to me is, I guess Dallas could and Pittsburgh could say the same thing, but their own tradition and history is as big as the NFL's almost. Bears could say that as well, where they got a long laundry list of not only Packer Hall of Fame, but that are also in the NFL Hall of Fame. And that says a lot. I mean, you have to, first of all, be around a long time. But the tradition and history is there, and to be thought of as one of the best in that, that franchise is, I mean, it's truly an honor. It really is.
What do you think the day will be like?
Nervous, probably.
Nervous?
In a good way, though. In a good way. Just almost kind of like before the first game type of. Very excited, and I was like that before every game. I was excited. I was a little nervous about how's it going to play out. Am I going to play good? Am I going to play bad? I mean, hopefully we can block them. Hopefully, and so I'm sure there'll be some of those emotions that's sort of like before a game.
Well, it's interesting you say nervous because, in reading about it, you said you want Bart Starr to be part of it, and obviously Bart, one of the greatest Packers of all time. But in reading that, I'm like, well, this is Brett's day. I wonder if he just, wants somebody.
Well, I kind of like someone to hold my hand.
Right.
Right. Which is really the truth. I mean, I've never been real good, believe it or not. Even though I love being a quarterback and the pressure being on me, I'm not really good like when the spotlight is like, okay, everyone else just move to the side.
Right.
It's kind of like, okay, but here's Bart,
Right.
And that's not to mention, it goes back to this tradition and history and respect for the game that I've always had. And I always wanted those guys to know, as when I was playing, that now that I'm one of the guys, you're nobody. Because that was never the way I know that people like Bart paved the way for my career.
I read an interview that you did, and you were asked for like the favorite moment from your career, and I thought what you said was interesting. You said it would have to include the interceptions, and the tough losses. Explain why.
It's I just don't look at my career and think of the good. Unfortunately, there was some bad, but I think that's what shapes us into the type of people we are, the character and the type of player. If I was, in 20 years, if I never lost a game, how would I really know what winning a big game or coming from behind or a Super Bowl or how would I really appreciate what that felt like if I've never experienced the down? Because then when you do, you really appreciate a last second throw or a season in which you endure and you're fortunate enough to win a Super Bowl, or you do some unbelievable things that early in the year or the previous year seemed impossible. If you win every game, how do you know what impossible is? Or possible? I mean, it's just, it's kind of like giving your kids everything, giving them everything. How will they ever know what hard work and having to go without something is really like? And so that's the way I look at my career. People say, well, would you change anything? Would you do this? Would you have played different? All that stuff. And I said, it is what it is. First of all, I can't change it. And it sure made me appreciate not only the football part of life, but just life in general, how quickly things can change and people can be taken away, how quickly you can become the starter, how quickly you can not be the starter. And that's the way I look at things. And so it's not perfect. It was, but it's my career, and you take the good with the bad, and it makes you appreciate the good a lot more.
What would you say is the most satisfying moment from your career?
I don't think that there is a game or a moment more so than the fact that, when people say, how do you want to be remembered or what? And it's like a retirement ceremony and Hall of Fame, all stuff. It's truly an honor, but I'd like to think that the body of work, not so much what was given after the fact, but the body of work speaks for itself. I could care less of where I rank in the experts, top 10 or whatever. It's just the way I played. I know I played with desire and love and passion for the game that, in my opinion, is not equaled by anyone. Was it the prettiest? Was it the best pocket passer? Was it look, I don't care about that. I just played as hard as I possibly could. And the most satisfying thing for me was that I did it, that I was able to dress out in the National Football League uniform for one game, better yet, 20 seasons. And again, not perfect, but I played every game like it was the last. I really did.
Really a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for making the time to do this.